Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this regular session of the Bloomington Common Council on this Wednesday, September the 7th. We will begin our meeting this evening by asking our clerk to call the roll.
Thank you. Councilmember Rosenbarger?
Here.
Volin?
Here.
Sims?
Here.
Scambalori?
Here.
Sandberg?
Here.
Rollo?
Here.
Flaherty?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
And Piedmont Smith.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. To summarize tonight's agenda, we do have two sets of minutes for approval from April 7th, 2021 and May 5th, 2021. We then go to our reports for council members, the mayor and city offices, council committees, and the public. The next opportunity for appointments to boards and commissions will be up next. And then we move into legislation for second readings and resolutions that include Resolution 22-16, a resolution expressing support for the extension of Bloomington Transit services outside the city boundaries for bus service to Daniels Way, and legislation for first readings, Ordinance 22-23 to vacate a public parcel regarding two 12-foot wide rights-of-way in the Lone Star Addition within a triangular-shaped block bordered by West Cottage Grove on the north, West 10th Street on the south, and North Monroe Street on the west. And this is Solomon L. Lowenstein Jr. and Julia G. Bierman petitioners. Additional public comment will allow up to 25 minutes on matters not on the agenda. For those that didn't get a chance at the start of the meeting, then we will discuss our council schedule before we move to adjourn for this evening. So first up, let us move to our minutes.
Madam President, I move approval of the council minutes for the regular session of April 7th, 2021 and the regular session of May 5th, 2021.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on any corrections? I understand some have already been made and submitted. With no further discussions, will the clerk please call the roll on approval for the minutes?
Move for a voice vote?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, those minutes are approved. Thank you. And now we move to council member reports. I will start on my left with Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
No report. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Smith?
Thank you. I just wanted to recognize the Bloomington PD. The other day I called in and asked about if they would come and check on somebody who was having some problems out by Eastland Plaza. And the dispatcher was of course, very kind and professional, and the officer showed up within about a minute and kindly was trying to help the woman who was having some difficulty. So I just want to recognize that. That was really great service and really fast and really compassionate. So thank you to the officer that did that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty?
No report, thank you.
Councilmember Rollo?
I have no report. Thank you.
And to my right, starting with Councilmember Rosenbarger.
No report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bolin.
Yes, thank you. First, I just want to say that I appreciate the council putting up with my remote attendance last week. I was sick, and I know that it made budget week a little bit harder, so I appreciate it. I am feeling better. Yesterday, I published a series of tweets on, of course, Twitter about students and voting, and I thought it was an opportune time to recapitulate what I wrote yesterday, namely that if there's ever been any doubt in the minds of college students about where they should register to vote, the answer is unequivocally where they go to college and not wherever was, quote unquote, back home. The 26th Amendment guarantees 18 years old and older the right to vote, has for 50 years. The census has always counted people where they spend most of their time, what the census calls your usual residence, where you spend the majority of your time in the year before Census Day. The census website says unequivocally that students in college should be counted where they go to college. The rules for registering to vote, in no state in the country does it take more than 30 days to establish residency for the purpose of voting. Indiana is one of those states, but there are plenty of states where you can register on the same day that you vote. At any rate, the deadline this year for registering to vote is October 11th for this very important midterm election. But the gist of my message is that if you drink wherever you drink the water, wherever you ride the bus, wherever, whatever fire department sends an engine to your house when you call 911, that is the place where you reside and the place you should care about for the purpose of voting. Despite the fact that students may not know the area or may be new to voting, doesn't make it any less important what we do here on this dais every week. We vote on all those issues and other issues that affect the daily lives of students and non-students alike. But there are no shortage of non-students who would say to students, you don't count, you're not from here, you shouldn't vote here. I'm just here to say that that's unequivocally not true, and you should be registering to vote. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to. You can still vote at home, what you consider to be your former home, but this is home now, and it will be for several years, regardless of how many times you may change your street address in that several years that you're a student. You're still a resident of Bloomington. We're still going to be voting on those things that affect your daily life. So that's the gist of it. I want to encourage everyone to register to vote by October 11th if you're in the state of Indiana, if you're in the city of Bloomington, no matter what your work status, as long as you are going to be 18 years old on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. I'd like to piggyback on Councilmember Smith just for a second. Out in my neighborhood earlier today, had an incident that required BPD to intervene. And also, I mean, and that's amazing enough. However, but there was also just as many Monroe County sheriffs out there. And it's kind of amazing how you might be different departments, but when you have a common goal, you work together and you solve that issue. So Officer James is who I talked with today, so I'm really very, very appreciative. And thank you. Lastly, National Hispanic and Latinx Heritage Month is from September 15th to October 15th. So I just want to say happy Hispanic Latinx Heritage Month to all of my other brothers and sisters of color. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Scambaluri.
No report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. I will just add that Councilmember Rollo and I have our monthly constituent meeting. We'll have one coming up on the 17th this month. That's a Saturday starting at 10, and that link, these are all Zoom. That link is on the City Council's calendar for anyone who would like to join that. The other thing I would like to say is to offer my thanks to the Redistricting Commission, who I understand has finished their work as of this morning, and we will be talking about that later in our meeting tonight. But I do appreciate the work of those 5 individuals that were selected by process, by the way we had established it to be set up, and it was a process to get there, to get these members on board. But when they finally came together, it is my understanding from reading the report this morning and reading their minutes that they have presented us with information that we will be happy to take a look at when it comes our way. So thank you. Now, everyone, let's see the mayor and city offices. There does not appear to be anyone here. Any council committee reports this evening? And seeing no council committee reports, let's move to our first opportunity for public comment. We do have at least one individual here in chambers, but let's go ahead and see if we have anyone on Zoom who might want to join our public comment at the beginning. And this is for, of course, matters not on tonight's agenda.
Yes, if there are members of the public joining us via Zoom that would like to comment, please use the raise hand feature to indicate your desire to speak. You can find that raise hand button in your control bar under the Reactions tab or the More tab, depending on the device you're on. And if you're not able to locate that raise hand button, please send a chat to the meeting host and we can recognize you that way.
All right, we will go ahead with our council commenter, and welcome.
Thank you. My name is Maggie Sullivan. I'm with Friends of Lake Monroe. I'm the watershed coordinator for the lake. I handed out some information earlier. It's the executive summary of our watershed management plan that we finished this spring. basically looking at what are the issues that face the lake and what can we do to improve and protect water quality. The three big issues for Lake Monroe are sediment, nutrients, and E. coli is not actually a concern in the lake, but it is in some of the streams that feed into the lake, and it could potentially be a concern in the future. I think we're perhaps more aware of the nutrients issue right now that we're seeing some algal blooms in the lake that are impacting the taste of our drinking water. I do want to thank CBU for doing a great job providing us with safe, reliable water, and they're trying their best to work on that taste issue. Our goal is to work on that source water and get that cleaner so that it's easier to process. I also handed out a flyer about Lake Monroe Day. This is a first ever event on Sunday, September 18th. We're having a kayak trip and a water plant tours of our drinking water plant, although they are already full up. We'll see if we can get CBU to open any more slots for that. And then we're having a little party at Upland Woodshop in the evening from 5 to 8. And it's just, we're trying to increase awareness of the importance of Lake Monroe. It's our sole source of drinking water. It's a huge economic driver for the region, brings about $40 million annually in tourism spending. And there are some issues that we need to work on to keep that lake sustainable through the future. I also want to ask you, council members, to please save the date of Saturday, October 22nd. We will be hosting a Watershed Summit with local officials across the watershed. So that's Monroe County, Brown County, and Jackson County. And we expect we may have some state representatives there as well. And really just to start a dialogue on how can we collaborate across the borders to protect and enhance the lake. We'll be sending you email information with more details, but that's coming up in October. And for those of you at home who are listening, if you're interested in looking at the Watershed Management Plan, it is on our website, which is friendsoflakemonroe.org, and there's also information there about Lake Monroe Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sullivan. Anyone from Zoom wishing to make a public comment?
I see no takers on Zoom.
All right, anyone else here in chambers? We'll wait just a minute or two. No, we won't wait that long. All right, let us move to appointments to boards and commissions. I understand that there is a change that we need to make. You can call on him. Matt. Oh, Councilmember Flaherty. I thought it was going to come from this side.
Thank you, President Sandberg. I thought this motion was best for me to make since I'm the one who made an error in our meeting in August when listing names for a group of appointments to the Community Advisory and Public Safety Commission. I misread my list as I was going down, and thanks to the clerk's office for catching that. So with that preface, I would like to move that Emily Alford be removed from seat C7 of the Community Advisory and Public Safety Commission to be replaced by Noel Conyer, as recommended by the interview committee charged with overseeing CAPS.
Second.
All right, moved and second. This a voice vote? All right, all in favor of that appointment, say aye.
Aye.
All right, and that correction has been approved. Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. All right, now we move to legislation for second readings and resolutions.
Still have appointments, I'm sorry. My teammates didn't step up, so I think I better. I'm so sorry. We are
Go
prepared to
ahead.
do this tonight, right? Yeah. I thought we did, okay. I like them, these are recommendations from Team 1, I'm sorry, Team A.
Oh, I'm sorry, more boards and commissions.
Yes, before we got
sorry,
further.
thank you.
I'm so sorry. But we like to recommend, or I move that we recommend David Jennings to seat C4 on the Commission on Aging.
Excuse me, can you speak into the microphone? I don't think everyone can hear you.
We appoint. We recommend to appoint. We move to appoint. Yeah, we move to appointment.
I didn't hear you.
Oh, that we move to appoint.
We move to appoint. David Jennings, seat C4, Commission on Aging. In the Urban Enterprise Association, we recommend appointment to Felissa Spinelli, seat C2, and that's having a business in the zone. And on the Commission for the Status of Black Males, we recommend appointing Herbert Cardwell to seat C2.
Second.
All right,
Thank you.
that's been moved and seconded.
Sorry,
All
I
in
didn't hear
favor,
you.
please say aye.
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 All right, those appointments have been approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else for boards and commissions? All right, now we are ready to move to legislation for second readings and resolution.
Madam President, I move introduction of Resolution 2216 to be read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Clerk will please call the roll.
We could do both.
Voice vote. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, and will the clerk please read?
Resolution 2216, a resolution expressing support for the extension of Bloomington Transit services outside the city boundaries for bus service to Daniels Way. The synopsis is as follows. This resolution is sponsored by Councilmember Volin. It would express the Common Council support for the extension of Bloomington Transit service to Daniels Way upon the completion of appropriate interlocal agreements between the city and county that specify exact areas and funding mechanisms for those services.
Thank you.
Madam President, I move that Resolution 2216 be adopted.
Second.
All right, Mr. Vola, you may have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. And if I could ask Mr. Lucas to put a map or two up for us to take a look at. But there's not a lot here. This is a pretty straightforward and simple resolution. At least I hope so. I hope you'll see it that way. Thanks to the newly approved local income tax, which we thought about this spring, the County Council now has a new funding mechanism for transit services that could be provided by the city. And for many years, the number one objective of anyone who has thought about expanding Bloomington transit services outside the city has been Daniels Way, the location of, in no particular order, Ivy Tech, Baxter Pharmaceutical, or Baxter and Scientific, and Cook Inc. One of the aspects of the statute that regulates the area that a public transit system can serve is that it can go outside that system specifically for the purposes of serving workers and commuters. And certainly this is a major employment area for the Bloomington metropolitan area. At any rate, in the spring, I sensed that the county, which has been at odds with the city on some matters over the past few years, at least the county council sensed, I sensed some misgivings in them, and so I wrote a draft of this to send it to individual members of them to say, would this make you feel better about our commitment, the city council's commitment to expanding Bloomington Transit outside the city if we were to pass it? And the general sense I got from the few that I spoke with was yes. And so what you have before you is nothing more than a resolution saying that the city council supports the idea of expanding service to outside the city. Now it is, assuming that an agreement can be hammered out, this resolution simply places the city council on the record for the first time formally as supporting an expansion of services outside the city. But it is still up to the mayor and the county commissioners to hammer out that agreement. There are several other significant agreements that the executives of city and county have been trying to hammer out in recent years. I see this resolution as simply removing a source of doubt for the mayor and for all of our county colleagues. For us to approve this simply says, yes, the city council is supportive of a deal and willing to do its part upon its completion. And I'll call your attention to the map on the screen. Actually, if we could zoom out a little bit just to see the whole map at first. And actually, could you put up the other map first, the map with the new route? So one of the most exciting aspects proposed by the administration in the discussion of the local income tax was this route that would be the first basically rapid transit bus route in the city. They're calling it the Crosstown Connector, and the corridor for that connector would run between 446 and Whitehall Crossing. This route is, give or take a tenth of a mile or two, 6 miles long, not 7.5 as I originally measured, although depending on the exact streets used in the route, it might vary. I'm not going to be held to that particular measurement, but a quick Google Maps check says this is a 6-mile route. And now if you could go to the other map. So in order to provide service to Daniels Way, the connector would have to be extended roughly another 2 miles. The distance between the points I used to measure were Brewster's Ice Cream on the east and the Office Depot on the west. Now, the current Route 3 goes all the way up to Lowe's. That's a good quarter to half a mile extra distance there. We're not really sure exactly where the connector would stop, but I don't think it'll go up that route. But from the Office Depot, which is close to 3rd Street, to Cook, all the way up Daniels Way, it's another 2 miles. So about, in theory, a quarter of the cost of providing the Crosstown Connector. It would be a quarter, again, the cost that would accrue to the city. Now, that assumes that the county would fund its own buses and its own drivers. But what this resolution calls for is for the county to fund only the marginal increase in cost. In other words, we're already going to be running the buses. We're already going to be hiring the drivers. There's no need for a separate bus system. So whatever the marginal increase in cost to go another 25% further, that's going to fall to the county, and that will be up to the executives of city and county to work out the exact details. And I'm agnostic about what other agreements they may include when discussing this topic. But having said that, this really isn't in our hands. What is in our hands is the ability to either declare that one or more routes, specific routes of Bloomington Transit that go outside the city be approved, or that we approve an area outside the city that could be served by any number of routes. I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But I will say that one of the immediate effects of an agreement would not be the Crosstown Connector, but the potential to extend Bloomington Transit Route number 3, which already runs close to Daniels Way, but is prevented from going any farther by the city limits. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions. Again, all this resolution would do is say formally, it would be to remove a source of doubt from the county and from the mayor's office that the council is or is not interested in this expansion. This resolution would say we absolutely are interested and we are ready to approve a deal as soon as it can be struck. With that, I'm happy to answer questions, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Councilmember Bullen. Is there anyone from the administration here? Are they here by Zoom who may want to speak to this before we go to council questions?
I don't see any city staff members on Zoom at the moment.
Okay.
No.
Well, let's go ahead then. Any questions from council for Councilmember Bullen? Councilmember Smith.
Councilmember Bullen, thank you for bringing this forward. This is really an excellent resolution. Can you tell us the estimated cost of the marginal cost to take that extra 1.3 miles out to Ivy Tech?
Well, I can say this. The Bloomington Transit estimated the cost of this corridor in June during the LIT conversation at $1.7 million a year. If we assume that, I mean, it's not going to cost a quarter of that to extend service. A quarter of that would be $400,000 plus. But I think it'll be less than $300,000 a year for the county to provide the service. Again, there's a lot of specifics that Bloomington Transit is going to have to calculate, not the least of which is the acquisition of buses. That might be a separate cost consideration, although I don't think that they're going to need to acquire extra buses for this route. So it's purely a matter of running the buses farther. And so I would estimate it at $300,000 a year or less.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Sims.
Thank you, and thank you, Councilmember Boland, for bringing this forward. It was my understanding that Bloomington City Council and Monroe County Council pretty much had fundamentally agreed on extending this route. So I guess this solidifies things as you stated. But my question would be having to do with the express line and route number 3. And I'm assuming there will be some overlap there, at least initially. So is that cost-effective with the transit system to have overlap? And do you expect any changes later, and particularly with Route 3?
That's a very good question. I think that it's going to take at least 2, probably 3 years for the express line to be realized. Route 3 could be extended as soon as the mayor and the commissioners make an agreement. But I think that your question will eventually be answered by Bloomington Transit. They'll decide whether one or both routes should be run. I'm kind of agnostic about that. I'm not really sure. My inkling is to say that they will probably keep both routes running because there's a different utility to the Route 3, which stops at many more stops. But I'm not sure I have an opinion beyond that.
Okay, thank you. You had that big map up earlier with the circle.
Could we have that other map?
No, I don't need it. I'm
Okay.
just trying to show you that circle, and my house is within that circle. And I am very, very aware of my neighbors, people in that area that uses Route 3. So I just want to ensure that there's going to be no disruption, even with the addition of the express line. But as you say, that's on down the line. But that's something I'll be kind of looking at and monitoring. But thank you again for bringing this forward.
Just a quick response. I don't see any reason why Bloomington Transit would change Route 3 to extend it. So I think it would still stop at all the other stops. But again, if there's any question about that, I don't think Bloomington Transit wants to do any harm to existing routes.
No, you're right. It may, except for both of them, in theory, will be going up and down 3rd Street, West 3rd. And it kind of don't make sense, at least from transit standpoint, to have them both. So I expect a different configuration, more than likely with Route 3. So I just wonder if you had any knowledge, information about that.
That's another excellent observation. My take would be, I don't know why they would reduce service on Route 3 in any way in order to extend it. If the express bus is also running there, I see that as just a greater benefit. There's simply more bus service being had there. There's no reason to curtail the current provision of service of Route 3, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from council? Councilmember Scamellori.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for bringing this. I think it's very exciting to think about having transit to such an employment center and education center. Can you take me through your math again? You mentioned 25% would...
I think you said the map. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, you talked about the connector being 6 miles at 1.7, and this is another 2 miles.
Right.
So would it not be a third again?
No, because that cost includes, again, the term I use in the resolution is the marginal cost. It is not, there's the initial cost of providing the service at all, and extending it however many miles it's not a proportionate amount. I'm sure that Bloomington Transit will say the same thing. In fact, they've already said that to me in so many words that, yeah, it's not going. In fact, I think Mr. Connell said that when we were talking about it, either during the lit or during the budget, that it's the cost per mile is not, like the first mile is much higher than additional miles.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional first round questions? Seeing none, we will go back to Councilmember Smith.
I just was going to add in that at one of the sessions that we had with Mr. Connell, he estimated the marginal cost that might be to the county of $75,000 to $100,000.
That was for Route 3
It was the extension
of Route 3.
out to Ivy Tech, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's the local route, not the express route.
Which makes it quite a doable thing, with our expressing that, and if they would come to an agreement, it would be, seems to me, a very doable project as long as they can come to an agreement.
Is there a question or?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
More like a point of information. Additional questions from council? And seeing none, it is time to go to the public. We will see if anyone here in chambers has a comment or anyone at home on Zoom.
While folks are lining up here in the chambers, I'll just invite folks on Zoom who would like to speak to this item to raise your hand by finding the raise hand button under the Reactions tab or the More tab in your control bar. And if you're not able to locate that, please send a chat to the meeting host and we can acknowledge you that way.
All right, let's go ahead with our in-chambers commenters.
Hi, Council. Good evening. My name is David Wolf-Bender, Indiana University Student Governments Director of City Relations. People who are watching virtually probably can't see it, but I'm wearing a shirt that says "Transit is the answer," and I fully believe that. IUSG is in support of this resolution tonight. We have a few reasons why. Public transit is related very closely to equity. It's directly correlated with equity, the ability to access jobs, the ability to access education. You can look at cities across the United States, from New York to Washington, even here to Bloomington. Transit is directly correlated with equity, so expanding transit is an expansion of equity. The second reason is that there are actually students attending Indiana University who also take courses at Ivy Tech. This is not something that a lot of people actually think about. A lot of students don't think about this. This is a process this is called double listing, where you take courses at Indiana University, but also concurrently take a few courses at Ivy Tech's Bloomington campus that can transfer back to your four-year degree at IU. So expanding this line would allow for students who might be double listing at IU to have another way to get to Ivy Tech that wouldn't be with a single occupancy vehicle, which are obviously very bad for the climate. And it might allow people who don't have a single occupancy vehicle to be able to get to Ivy Tech easier. The third thing is there are students who take courses at IU who stay here during the summers and may elect to take a course or two or three or four at Ivy Tech at their Bloomington campus during the summer. Maybe it's more cost effective, maybe there were no more seats in a summer class. So expanding this route would give lots of opportunity for people during the summers as well. So this is good for climate. It's a good expansion of city services, gives another option compared to single occupancy vehicles. And those are just some of the reasons why IUSG is in support of this resolution tonight. So we encourage its passage. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone at home on Zoom? All right, we have one more here in chambers.
Good evening, Council. This is Christopher MG from the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. I want to echo my colleague on the Parking Commission and his sentiments in endorsing Resolution 2216 to authorize transit outside Bloomington city boundaries. The Chamber has long been an advocate on this issue. This resolution does not amend Ordinance 2.76, but it remains a step in the right direction. We feel the expansion could be done through a simple 1.3-mile extension west of Route 3 that's been discussed tonight that allows residents here to park 48 education employment hub opportunities. Our main goal remains to see service start there at Ivy Tech for their spring semester. At a mere $75,000 marginal incremental cost per year, this is not an expensive endeavor for the city and county to get into. The Chamber is eager to see this new east-west express transit connector. However, with a price tag of what is estimated to be $2.1 million, this is a big lift requiring multiple studies, years away from coming to fruition. Just this past weekend, I had a conversation with a social worker at a barbecue, and she noted that one of her clients walks that 1.3 miles to class. This is probably not an isolated case. Making the expansion part of a larger strategic plan may appear optimum, but the need is too great not to act sooner. At the last council work session, Kent McDaniel, a BT board member, noted how the original 1982 statute differs from the other 7 in the state of Indiana, only allowing service within the city limits. Right now, we are an outlier among those. The recent convergence of representatives from the county council, the commissioners, this elected body, and the mayor's office to discuss the expansion of the convention center ushered in a new era of city-county collaboration. We feel the time is right to continue that momentum into expansion of BT service into uncharted roadways with the passing of this resolution. Thank you tonight for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom? All right, back to council for any final comments. Councilmember Rowland.
I prefer to defer to others.
Councilmember Piedmont-Smith.
Yes, I'm very much in favor of this resolution. Everybody I've spoken to from various walks of life would like to see extended bus service to Ivy Tech and Cook out on Daniels Way. And so I just wanted to thank my colleague, Councilmember Volan, for bringing this forward, and I will be supporting it.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, well, I will reiterate that this is important, and I do appreciate having the opportunity to weigh in, and to the extent that this might help move things forward and get that all-important route out to connect Ivy Tech. Very good case made by our student leader about how important it is to get IU students back and forth. Thank you for that. So I will be in support. All right. Councilmember Volan.
Yes, this resolution came out of discussions around the lit. It was originally inspired by a mild skepticism from our counterparts on the county council. And so I realized that we had talked about this for a long time and never actually done anything to move the ball. It is still a resolution. Nothing is going to happen tonight except perhaps some reassurances. I wish we didn't have to do it. Even if annexation were to succeed, this area of the city would not be completely annexed. Those of us who were on the council in 2019 voted on the payment in lieu of taxes that Cook applied for, which I think was a shame, and I could not bring myself to vote for it. But I recognize that they and Baxter and Ivy Tech are crucial aspects of our economy, of the Bloomington economy. If anything, this is, I like to think, a signal to the mayor and to the county commissioners. It's time to come to agreement. We all think we need this. At least here on the, I'm assuming if there's a 9-0 vote here, we're all going to say that we need this. I think our county council counterparts would agree. So I would urge the executives of both city and county to take to heart the message here that we need to come to agreement as soon as possible. The sooner that Route 3 can be extended, the sooner everyone is served in this community. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no final council comments, let us go ahead and call the roll on Resolution 22-16.
Councilmember Volan.
Yes.
Sims.
Yes.
Scambalori.
Yes.
Sandberg.
Yes.
Rallo.
Yes.
Flaherty.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Piedmont-Smith.
Yes.
Rosenbarger.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and that passes 9-0.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Councilmember Volan. We are now ready for legislation for first readings.
Madam President, I move that ordinance 2223 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 And will the clerk please read?
Ordinance 2223 to vacate a public parcel regarding two 12-foot wide rights-of-way in the Lone Star Addition within a triangular-shaped block bordered by West Cottage Grove on the north, West 10th Street on the south, and North Monroe Street on the west. Solomon L. Lowenstein Jr. and Julia G. Bierman petitioners. The synopsis is as follows. The petitioners, Solomon L. Lowenstein Jr. and Julia G. Bierman, request vacation of two 12-foot wide rights-of-way in the Lone Star addition within a triangular-shaped block bordered by West Cottage Grove on the north, West 10th Street on the south, and North Monroe Street on the west.
Thank you. And I am referring ordinance 22-23 to the Committee of the Whole that will be meeting on September the 14th. Yes, Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
I move that the council discharge the Committee of the Whole from considering ordinance 22-23.
Second.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. It is debatable and amendable. Are there any comments about not referring this to the Committee of the Whole? Yes, Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I just wanted to explain why I made this motion. The Committee of the Whole is a body that does not have any record kept of its meetings, and it is more appropriate, in my view, to move this to a second reading so that the council can deliberate and have record of the deliberations that take place. If we are not ready after one evening of discussion to vote, then it can be sent to a third reading. So we don't lose anything and we gain the record keeping that comes with the regular session and does not come with the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you for that. Anyone else have a comment? Councilmember Flaherty.
Thank you. Just following up on a similar point, there's a phenomenon that happens in particular with items that don't end up meriting more than one night of discussion, which is that the presentation, most of the substantive or all of the substantive discussion and debate and public comment happen at the Committee of the Whole, and then we wind up with a second reading that essentially has no record at all. So it's not just that we're duplicating, we're having an off-the-record and an on-the-record discussion. Quite often, all of the substantive work happens at Committee of the Whole, and I think that compounds the problem. So it's, I think, maybe likely to happen in this particular case with Ordinance 22-23, and I just wanted to note that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comment? All right, if there are no comments, Councilmember Smith.
If I can, I just want, thinking about this issue, the two things that come to my mind, and we deliberate in public, so is one is that sometimes the council schedule has been very heavy over the last few years, me being relatively new, and I'm not sure how we could have got all that work done if we didn't do a council of the whole. So that was something that came into my mind after thinking about this and looking at some of the information that I knew we were going to talk about this evening. And then there's also the possibility that there's nothing to prevent us from having council of the whole have a record that is a narrative record as we do with the regular sessions. There's really nothing to prevent that. So that's just something that is available to be a part of that whole discussion. And discharging our duties sometimes seems like we have a lot of work to do, and I don't know if we can do it within the confines of a meeting every other week. And what my colleagues say are, very valid. So I haven't come up with some great plan or great resolution to it in my own mind, but those are the two things that it made me think about. And so here we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from council before we hear from our clerk? You do have a comment?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Councilmember Smith, I appreciate your comment, but there is something that keeps you from getting narrative minutes from a committee meeting, which is its additional cost and time that is required from the clerk's office. So before you start suggesting that it is an easy thing to do, I would strongly suggest that we have a longer discussion about what it would actually be, what would be required in terms of budget and staffing before we actually ask for narrative minutes from the clerk's office for committee meetings and narrative minutes. I think that we could actually look into other options for committee meetings in terms of getting records in addition to what's legally required for your council meetings, because there are memos that are produced from all of your meetings that list the date, the time, the room, who attended, the motions and actions that are taken. But in terms of the presentations that are given and what is said in the meetings, part of it is just a matter of custom as opposed to what's required. And I think that is the conundrum that you're trying to solve here, because it's difficult and members of the public don't know what is actually being saved as part of the council record. And I personally would like to see some of these presentations be saved as part of the city's record, because you have a lot of great information that comes before you in your regular meetings and that come in your committee meetings, but it doesn't always make it into the minutes. So I'm happy to work with all of you, but I also want to make sure that we do it responsibly and that we don't commit staff to doing something that they really don't have the time to do.
Thank you. Councilmember Rallo.
Yes, on reflection, just a couple things to note. One is that although there's no formal record at a committee of the whole, there is a complete record digitally recorded and played and archived on Bloomington cable access television, where people can see that and contact us before the final vote and have their say, and we have time to consider that. If there are public who are interested and concerned about topics such as this ordinance that's coming forward, they have the ability to come first to the committee of the whole, and I think that it is in the public interest to have that, and I've always maintained that. So I would not want to circumvent that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment from council? Councilmember Bullen.
One of the ostensible reasons that I've been told that we have the committee of the whole is so that all the voices in the room can be heard. I would say, though, that since I've spoken so much on an issue like this, I just want to say that Councilmember Rallo is sort of missing the point that we've been making for 2.5 years, and that you all don't want to hear what I think about this. Thank you.
Councilmember Rallo.
That is not true. In fact, I hope to hear from everyone at a committee of the whole meeting, because my opinion can change, and I withhold judgment until the final vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I will just say that I have always, in my tenure on this council, appreciated that buffer, if you will, between the time something is introduced, something is heard in a committee of the whole discussion, which is virtually not a regular session. It is true that it is not the same standard where minutes are taken, but the public is paying attention. And I've appreciated hearing from my fellow council members about issues that come before us at a committee of the whole, because it's the first time we've had an opportunity to discuss it. Hearing the robust questions that come from my council colleagues often helps me reflect a little bit more. And that week, that buffer week that we have between the time it's discussed, the public gets a chance to make comments. We now have Zoom. People can tune in through Zoom. It's available on CATS. So even without the official minutes, it is an opportunity to give the public another buffer week as well. And as Councilmember Rallo has said, we often get contacted by constituents between the time something is actually presented in a committee of the whole and the public gets a chance to hear where council members are, given the questions they have and the input that they have. And then we take it to that next week where it is in a regular session and the final vote is taken or not, because we always have the option to send it to a third reading. That's always been our purview. And so I do respect the process of the committee of the whole. And it's unfortunate that some people are thinking that it's possibly not necessary, that it's a waste of time or a waste of resources. I don't see it that way. I see it as yet another week that we have to put information before the public and be as transparent as we can. Some of the items that are discussed in a committee of the whole may seem like basic housekeeping that's not important enough to warrant an additional meeting. But I think in a way that's disrespectful, because it's an opportunity for people to see what we do up here. What's important enough to come before us, I think, is important enough to have that extra week. From a procedural standpoint, Councilmember Scambaluri and I, when we are in scheduling meetings with the administration and with our staff, we discuss these things. It's our job to traffic control the agenda, and we decided that yes, we wanted to go ahead and schedule this for a committee of the whole because, as you will hear when we get to our counseling schedule, there's another matter for us to consider that has come up that would be worthy of having a first discussion. Not the last, not the second to the last, but the first discussion on the findings from the redistricting committee. So I do feel it would be important to hold a committee of the whole meeting next week. And again, we can take our time with any issue that comes before us. We are not tied to voting for it in the following regular session. But I think having an initial discussion has merit. And I stand by my decision to refer it to the committee of the whole, so I would not support this motion. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, the buffer that President Sandberg mentions is naturally built into our process because we have a first reading, and then 2 weeks later we have a second reading. That buffer is there, whether we have a committee of the whole or not. As a matter of fact, the buffer is more of a buffer if we don't immediately the next week discuss the item, but rather have 2 weeks for the public after the first reading to get in touch with us and for us to consult with members of the public and affected stakeholders. Furthermore, the mention of respecting the process is it's kind of a misnomer. I mean, the process, I think perhaps what President Sandberg may be referring to is respecting precedent. Certainly in the city of Bloomington, as long as I've been on council, committee of the whole has been the precedent and has been sort of what we do, the way we do business. But if you look at other city councils and other bodies, the committee of the whole is rarely used. And I think the perhaps unwitting implication when President Sandberg says she respects the process is that some of us do not respect the process, and that is simply not true. We feel that some of us, or I'll just speak for myself, feel like the process is not serving the public and not serving us in the best way possible. And this process is really just what we are used to and not what Robert's Rules generally has the committee of the whole doing. So I wanted to state that I still feel that moving an item to second reading is appropriate in almost all cases. Furthermore, a third reading has never in my memory been proposed by Councilmember Sandberg. So it's always been an option, but it's not something that, again, has been part of the inertia of how council has done business. And I think we should reconsider it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bullen.
Yes, well, we did have this debate a couple of years ago, and I want to remind the majority that they abolished all other committees so that there was not much choice except to refer to committee of the whole if one was going to refer to committee, unless an ad hoc committee was going to be created. But there's another solution, which is simply to turn the committee of the whole into a special session schedule special sessions. I mean, if the goal of the majority is to meet weekly so that we have options in order to have at least 2 full weeks between first reading and final passage, special sessions would allow for the notes to be kept. We would finally at least admit that we are, for all practical purposes, a body that meets weekly and not biweekly or monthly. That was certainly the way it was under the Committee of the Whole. This ordinance could have been referred to the Land Use Committee, which was also abolished in January by the majority. You know, like there was if the spacing out of legislation to be heard is the goal of the majority, there are ways to do it that don't use a all but misunderstood retrograde aspect of Robert's Rules of Order, which I would submit that many of my colleagues have never studied and do not appreciate that the Committee of the Whole was never meant to be used the way that we use it. So I would respectfully disagree with any use of the Committee of the Whole. I also don't think that this particular piece of legislation is any more difficult or complicated than previous ordinances for which we've canceled Committee of the Whole pretty much all year. So, you know, respectfully, I think that Councilmember Rallo is mistaken about how the Committee of the Whole should be used, and I strongly urge that we discharge this from Committee of the Whole and that we never use it again. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Councilmember Rallo.
Yeah, just to say, this is reflecting on my colleague, Councilmember Piedmont Smith, comment. I'm not quite understanding. First reading is just simply an introduction to for the public. We all know this in council, but it's just simply an introduction of the item to the record, and there's no presentation, no debate, no discussion. And so it's quite possible then that the only debate discussion that could occur is in a regular session. So having a Committee of the Whole provides 2 hearings, which, unless it's simply a simplistic pro forma vote, is always in the public interest, I believe. It gives notice to the public. They understand the topic. They have a week to contact us. They have time to consider it. We have time to consider it, consider input from our colleagues and public comment. So I maintain that, and I also think that hearing from all of us instead of a select committee of people is superior, just because there are more people debating it and understanding it and commenting on it. So I think this is pretty straightforward. I find it very, I've always favored it, and we've tried the special committees and found them wanting, actually, the majority of us. So we're back to the Committee of the Whole, and I'm quite pleased that we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, just one additional reason why I feel that items should be sent to second hearing at a regular session rather than Committee of the Whole is that Committee of the Whole often results in staff making their presentations twice, which is just not necessary in many cases. So it's also, I think, shows more respect for staff time so that there isn't a duplicative presentation 2 weeks in a row. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Thank you. I agree with Councilmember Piedmont Smith, and I also know the opposite has happened this year, especially that we've had Committee of the Whole and then we've had staff come back to regular session and entirely skip a presentation and ask if there are any new questions. And I think that is a really big problem for our public record. I mean, having it on CATS is one thing, but having minutes recorded that are searchable by anyone, you know, with words is another thing entirely. I also think Councilmember Rowland's point makes a lot of sense. If something is for some reason urgent, we can schedule a special session so that we are able to take legislative action if we are ready to do so on the Wednesdays in between 2 regular sessions. I also, though, think that this council has had a lot of discussion around a sense of urgency that we don't want to create if it doesn't exist, and we want to make sure that we really take our time when dealing with legislation and give ample notice to the public, which is why the system is set up for a first reading and then a second reading 2 weeks later. I also think with public comment, I mean, thinking back to the UDO, I was out there making comments every week. First, I really didn't know the difference between committee of the whole and regular session, and I consider myself to be a pretty intelligent human, pretty engaged. Second, I would make the same comment both weeks. So I really wasn't coming back with anything new, and I think that's what we see here too, that members of the public feel like they have to be at both meetings, and it really takes a toll on them that we don't really have to do. I think if we can just skip committee of the whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, if we have exhausted the discussion, I guess we are ready for a vote on the motion on the table, which is to discharge the recommendation to forward this matter to the committee of the whole. If the clerk will please call the roll.
Councilmember Sims,
No.
Scambalori,
No.
Sandberg,
No.
Piedmont, Rallo,
No.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
No.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenberger,
Yes.
and Volin.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. That is 4-5-0. And so the matter, ordinance 22-23, will be referred to the committee of the whole on the 14th. Now we are ready for our second opportunity for public comment this evening. Anyone who has not made a comment, anything not on tonight's agenda, is there anyone from Zoom who would like to make a comment? And this is before we move to our council scheduling and adjournment of this meeting.
I'll just extend the invitation for folks on Zoom who might wish to comment. You can use the raise hand feature to indicate you'd like to speak. That raise hand button is in your control bar under the Reactions tab or the More tab, depending on your device. And if you can't locate that, please send a chat to the meeting host and we can recognize you that way.
Seeing any hands raised?
I see no hands shooting up.
All right, and with that, let us now move to a discussion of our council schedule. And if you don't
Yes.
mind leading us forward with this next piece.
Just one reminder and then one potential action tonight. The council has a scheduled work session this Friday to hear about items coming forward during the next legislative cycle. At the moment, that could include a resolution proposing a UDO overlay district for the Hopewell neighborhood, as well as a potential redistricting ordinance based on the recent recommendations from the Citizens Redistricting Advisory Commission that President Sandberg mentioned earlier. So at the moment, those two items would be ready for preview. Unless there's indication tonight that members are not available for that, we'll plan on holding that work session this Friday at noon, I believe in the McCloskey room.
All right, very good. And if we could have some advising on how to proceed, because I would like to entertain the idea of calling a special session for next week in order to introduce the redistricting. And for that first discussion that would then follow and then join ordinance 22-23 for discussion. Can you walk us through the mechanics of what we need to do if we wish to pursue
Yes.
that option?
Yes, as Council President Sandberg noted earlier during tonight's meeting, and as I just mentioned, the Citizens Redistricting Advisory Commission issued its report and recommendation at a meeting this morning to the council on a proposed redistricting map for your consideration. If the council wishes to schedule a special session for next Wednesday to precede the scheduled committee of the whole meeting, that could serve as an opportunity for the council to introduce an ordinance bringing the Redistricting Commission's recommendation forward, to introduce that ordinance for first reading. which would then allow you to discuss that ordinance immediately following the special session next week if you'd like to hold one at the scheduled committee of the whole. All of this would then allow you to hold a second reading on this ordinance and a potential vote, if you're ready, on September 21st, ahead of the introduction, the current scheduled introduction of budget legislation. The president of the council can call special sessions, but the council can also schedule special sessions by motion. And the president, I think, has asked to bring this up to see if what the council's appetite is for this.
Yes, I would like to call for a special session next week.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any debate? Councilmember Flaherty?
First, actually, a point of order. I don't think a motion is needed. I believe the council president can simply call the special session. But if we're going to vote on a motion, I'm happy to do so and comment on it, which is that I think this is not in the public interest. I think we just heard all about how we need time and buffers and spacing, and now we're going to use committee of the whole to have first reading immediately followed by discussion. We do this from time to time with committee of the whole. We use it to shoehorn something in that I think, again, is a disservice to the public. With this particular ordinance that we'll be considering, I think there's a special case that it needs to be within the public record and not simply in a committee meeting because we're discussing the boundaries of districts for for representation purposes. So I just fully disagree with the entire process that's been outlined. I do not support it. Thank you.
Thank you. And to be clear, the discussion that was had in our scheduling meetings as we're thinking this through, it is not the intent of Councilmember Scamilleri and myself who were in on this discussion to fast track this, speed this up in any way other than the redistricting committee is finished with their work. And it is, I think, a timely conversation for the community to have between the time we as a council either vote to accept their recommendations or move forward in another way. So this gives the same amount of time. We discuss it again. I'm sure it will be a robust discussion, and I'm sure the public will be interested in hearing all about it, to hear what the redistricting commission has done. And then when it comes to the regular session on the 21st, we do have an option if we feel there's not enough time for the public to wrap their heads around it or for us to decide if this is a good recommendation or not. It could be moved to the 28th for a special session for another lively discussion. I'm holding that certainly as a possibility as this gets vetted and discussed with the public. So I feel that since we got a slow start in getting this commission together, they have finally made their recommendations. I think we have an obligation to hear them as quickly as possible, but not to fast track any decision. That is not the intent of my moving it to a committee of the whole discussion. Councilmember Volan.
Well, a couple things. First of all, if we knew that this was coming and the president wanted to schedule a special session, why not do that in lieu of the committee of the whole? Why not simply have both items that you wanted to consider at a special session? Why schedule both? There's no need. Have a special if you're going to have a special session anyway, conduct all the business in the special session. This doesn't make sense to me why we'd have two meetings except that it's habit. Secondly, we have to get a response back by November 1st so that they have time to reconsider it if we reject the map. We don't want to wait that long, but going through the normal order, scheduling it for the next available regular session would still allow us to consider it with plenty of time to get it back to them before November 1st so they have some extra time to reconsider a map if we send it back to them. So for both of those reasons, not only do I would support the special session if we were to eliminate the committee of the whole, because there is no need for both. And I think it's absurd that we're even considering both. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sims, did you have a hand up? Anyone else?
Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Thank you. Wow, this feels like complete breakdown and understanding of how our process works. Can anyone explain, using Robert's rules, why we would have 2 meetings in one night?
I will ask our council attorney, Stephen Lucas, to give us guidance on that.
I believe our local code prohibits discussion of an item of legislation at its first reading. And so in the past, when the council has wished to both introduce an item of legislation during a particular evening, it has scheduled either a regular session immediately followed by a committee meeting or a special session immediately followed by a committee meeting. I actually went back and looked at the council's consideration of Ordinance 1229, which I believe was the last redistricting ordinance, and the council did this exact thing. There was a special session immediately followed by a committee of the whole to both introduce and then discuss that item of legislation on the same night. It's a process this council has used from time to time, essentially when the schedule calls for doubling up meetings at a meeting. But I believe it's because local code calls for no discussion of legislation at its first reading.
Additional conversation? Councilmember Scambolari.
So I'd just like to confirm my understanding, based on what you just said, an item, were we to only hold a special session, we could introduce items but not discuss them?
I apologize. I was pulling up our local code just to make sure I was telling you the right information. Could you repeat your question?
So just to double check my understanding, are you saying that if we were to have only a special session, we could use that to introduce legislation, but we could not discuss it?
If the legislation on the special sessions agenda was being introduced for first reading.
For first reading, right.
Local code would call for no discussion of that item at that same meeting.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sims.
I will say at its first reading, not necessarily within the same meeting. There is a process by which the council can move to a second reading at the same meeting and discuss it.
Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. At this point, I would support the council president and our leadership team, which I think, I hope we don't consider that to be habit. That's just proper respect and protocol, I think. And we can laugh if we want, but that's my thoughts. My other thing is that I would like to make sure that if we do schedule a special session, that we include our clerk, since that was a non-staff week, and we want to make sure if these are going to be official minutes that we've got available clerk staff to be there. That would be my only reservation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Boland.
Just to reiterate the point of order of Mr. Lucas, so could not a unanimous vote allow consideration of an item on the same night?
Yes, it could.
Okay, so it is feasible that the council could consider the issue at the special session?
Yes.
Okay. With all due respect to my several colleagues, there has not been a lot of respect among us with respect to process. This problem is never going to go away until we resolve it. But the way the majority has done it has been absolutely at the opposition of the minority. And I don't understand why they continue to refuse to even read Roberts to see how anomalous the Committee of the Whole is. But according to the rules that they established at the beginning of this year, they could have a special session followed immediately by the Committee of the Whole. We have, in fact, done it before. We usually did it because we were trying to cram things in. There is time in the process to hear the redistricting issue at the next regular session and still get it back to the redistricting commission if it is needed well before November 1st. So I would support a special session if there was no Committee of the Whole, but I otherwise cannot support any of the proposals that the majority has made tonight for how to consider next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, well, I would like to stand with the decision to have the special session called for next week for the purpose of introducing the opportunity in the Committee of the Whole to follow to allow the Redistricting Commission to make their report to Council and for us to have a robust discussion about it to begin the public engagement with what is ahead for us. All right. Yes, Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
I believe there's a motion on the table to hold a special session September 14th.
All right. So back to the motion on the table.
Am I mistaken, Madam Clerk?
Yeah,
We have a second.
we had a second.
Actually, I was going to ask for clarification for exactly what the motion was from Councilmember Rallo, because it was stated, it was a little jumbled when it was first stated, so I wanted to actually make sure on
Yes, it is.
what the motion was.
And we don't have anything in writing, so I don't know if Councilor Lucas could just advise us on what the motion actually is.
Point of order, I mean, it could also simply be withdrawn. Again, as noted, the council president has the authority to call a special session, as long as no one opposes. Withdrawing the motion would be the...
I believe Councilmember Flaherty is correct. The benefit of considering a motion and voting on a motion is some indication of intent to attend and willingness to attend such a special session.
Mm-hmm. So should we have the motion withdrawn if this is causing complications here, or do we want to go ahead and proceed
I
with the
believe
motion?
Council President Sandberg is able to call a special session. I believe she's communicated her intent to do so. If the maker of the motion wants to withdraw it, I think the special session will be scheduled and held.
I will withdraw the motion for a special session on September 14th.
All right, and so we're back to where we are with having the special session to be able to have 2 items on the Committee of the Whole meeting next week, which will include redistricting committee report and discussion. All right, thank you for that. I appreciate the feedback. Do we need to have a show of hands about the work session this Friday, or is it, we do have items, yes?
If we will have items, and if members don't mind giving an indication of whether they can attend this Friday's work session.
Can we ask what the items are?
The redistricting ordinance, which would then be released that same day in the packet, and a resolution on the Hopewell neighborhood overlay.
So again, this gives us another opportunity to see the report that just was issued this morning and to have a work session discussion about it for next week. All right.
Madam President?
Yes.
I just wanted to briefly note that I don't think I've attended a work session all year, and that's largely a product of professional obligations that prevent me from doing so. That doesn't bother me too much, but just wanted to remind my colleagues that generally speaking, the work sessions are not meant for much substantive discussion. The ostensible reason was an extra preview for council of what's coming, so we're not surprised by what shows up in a packet. At least that's what I've heard tell from the days when this was originated. And additionally, an opportunity to ask questions or ask for the type of information you might want to see presented at a regular session, but those meetings also not having minutes and generally being very sparsely attended by the public. I would just caution folks to not slip into too much substantive discussion when possible. It's easy to sort of accidentally head down that road, having attended plenty of those meetings myself in the past. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And with that, it looks like we have concluded our business for today, and so...
Move
motion to
adjournment.
adjourn. Moved and seconded? All in favor? Aye.
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 We're out of here. Thank you.